Welcome to Law Society Younger Members Committee Career Information Session number 1. Hannah Shaw talks to Damien Tansey SC about developing a successful career as a solicitor.
Hello everyone and welcome to what is our first information session in our spring series of career information sessions. My name is Hannah Shaw. I'm a member of the Younger Members Committee on the Law Society of Ireland, and I'm also an associate in the Dispute Resolution Department of A&L Goodbody. And we're delighted to be joined this evening by Mr. Damien Tansey, who is the senior partner in his own firm in Sligo, which practices in medical negligence and other areas. And is also one of the first solicitor senior counsels ever in Ireland. So congratulations on that, Damien, and we're delighted to have you here on the topic of developing a successful legal career. We're very much looking forward to hearing all your words of wisdom. And I suppose I thought it might be helpful before we begin, Damien, just to set the frame on what we consider a successful legal career. I would love if we could also have, well, we're very excited to hear, your career tips and how we might make partner or how you might make that next promotion or spot an area for growth. Equally, I would be delighted to hear any tips that you might have in terms of managing a good work-life balance over the lifetime of such a successful legal career as you've had. You might start by just telling us a bit about yourself and your own practice.
Hello, Hannah, and fellow members. I'm delighted and privileged to have this opportunity to share some of my experience with your membership in the hope that perhaps it will provide some guidance and some direction in their own lives, because it is a minefield out there in many ways, and it's awfully competitive. I qualified in 1980 and I set up my practice in 1980, so that's a bit unusual in many respects. But I had had some experience working in the Department of Justice after I left university, and I lectured in the third level sector for a number of years in UCG and a number of the ITs. But I started the practice in 1980, as I said. And I'd say within 4 years, it was by far the biggest practice in the county of Sligo. And I decided very early on that my preference was for litigation, and there was no litigation happening in Sligo at the time. And that involved, obviously, going to the district court and fighting cases. Up to that time, cases were dealt with on the basis of nods and winks, and the court was over in an hour. And I decided very quickly that if you join that brigade, you'll get lost in that brigade. So I decided to challenge everything, to challenge all proofs, and to insist that if somebody is to be convicted, then they must withstand the challenge that I presented to the state in terms of proving their case. You're living and working in a competitive environment. You're working in the private sector, and it's awfully important to remember that. Your entire life is competitive, and if you don't see it as such, you'll be passed out dramatically. Whether you're working in your own practice, in which event you're competing with other practices, or if you're working in a big practice like you, for example, Hannah, you're competing with peers in the same work area that you're working in. When you're having reviews at the end of the year, your performance is compared to the performance of your peers. And when management in a large practice is seeking to identify stars, they will look for performance-related issues, how you're doing, how you're dealing with clients. Are the clients asking for you? Have you empathy with the clients? Are you able to manage and handle cases on your own? Have you the wit, for example, when you run into difficulties to seek the help that you need and the guidance that you need, and that you're able to take it on board when you get it and move with it? So that's the first point. You're working in the private sector, and it's all about competition. When you start, and I understand that your cohort is the group between 0 to 7.
That's right. Yeah.
You're all wondering, what areas of law are you going to specialize in?
Mm-hmm.
And life today as a lawyer is about specialization. You'll do very well in the areas where you have an edge. Here in Sligo, for example, here in Connacht, here in the county of Sligo, in Connacht, and in Ireland generally, we are seen as having an edge in the area of litigation, in the area of conflict resolution. And we get clients from all over the country, particularly in the area of medical negligence, because we are seen as having an edge in that area. So we put our focus and our energy into the areas where we're recognized as being leaders. And keeping that brand and that acknowledgement of that expertise alive is a constant effort. It's a constant challenge. And I often say to my fellow partners here and colleagues that we will be in 6 years' time where we deserve to be. We will be in 10 years' time where we deserve to be. And if you don't see yourself as constantly evolving, if you don't see yourself as having to deal with competition in all sorts of different forms, you'll be passed out. So you have to have focus, you got to put your energy into areas where you have the edge. And building up that brand involves results, recognized as achieving results. That involves a lot of critical decision-making at a very early stage in a case. Somebody comes into you with a very compelling story about an adverse event in a hospital, for example. And from the very beginning, we're critically assessing the story in order to determine whether, for example, we're going to invest resources in the prosecution of this case, or whether we say that the case is a non-runner. And that's a very vital and critical stage in our modus operandi here. We listen to the client. We meet a client for the first time, and they're sharing with us the most intimate of details, the most private events in their lives, about the most private parts of their anatomy and so on. And it's awfully important that that first interview, that first encounter is beneficial primarily for the client, in the sense that the client feels that they're in a place where there's an expert listening to them. They're in a law firm where, before they leave at the end of an hour, at the end of 2 hours, when they leave the office, they know that these people know what they're about. They have confidence immediately in the way they're setting about handling this case. And of course, that confidence will grow as the case grows and as the relationship between the client and the solicitor grows. But we put a lot of energy and a lot of time into deciding whether there is or is not a cause of action, because we're going to invest resources in that case. And very often it's a contingency arrangement. If we don't win, we don't get a fee. So we're not fools. We're in the private sector. We're in a business, even though we're practicing a profession. We employ business techniques in the running of that practice to make sure that that practice is successful. And not only successful in the courtroom on a regular basis, year in, year out, but successful in terms of providing a very good income for all the people in the practice, employment within the practice, and so on. So, for example, in the area of medical negligence, you might have 10 consultations in order to generate, say, 2 good cases. So the attrition rate, for example, in medical negligence is quite significant. But it's as well to root out the cases that are not going to produce a result at an early stage than, for example, spend a lot of resources and find yourself 2 years down the road or 3 years down the road getting nowhere with that particular case. So we're in the private sector, we're competitive, and we have a brand, which brand has to be maintained to the fore all the time. Medical negligence, health, and matters associated with it are of interest to everybody. And so they attract a lot of media attention. Whenever there's a court case in Dublin dealing with medical negligence, it attracts a lot of media attention. So you're in the public eye all the time. And if you're in the public eye all the time, you've got to be producing results. So you don't read about us losing cases, because we're extremely careful in the cases that we prosecute and that we bring before the court.
So there's a huge amount, it's fair to say, of risk assessment at the beginning or of the outset of any case that you take on. I'm very interested, Damien, in what you say about seeing your practice as a business and kind of, running it as a business and kind of developing your brand and being very aware of that. Can you see how COVID has impacted that? I mean, how do you have that FaceTime when you're first meeting? How do you build rapport and empathy with clients? How do you showcase your expertise, particularly if you're like me, zooming from your sitting room corner where I am now, it sometimes lacks the gravitas of, your boardroom and I'm not allowed in the office at the moment. Can you think of any ways that, people at my level can still work on their business development and developing their practice and client relationships?
Well, COVID has produced a lot of challenges in relation to the practice of law. It's awfully important to build up a relationship at the very beginning with the client. The client has to be, as I said earlier, has to be confident that you are as good a lawyer as they can instruct to prosecute this case on their behalf. I mean, you will see, for example, that we have clients literally from all over the country, from Dublin, from Limerick, from Cork, from Tipperary. We have clients from all over the country in the area of medical negligence. But certainly COVID is a challenge. And we have opened up a new office in Dublin ourselves, a fully staffed new office at 4 Herbert Street in Dublin. And we opened it in the middle of the pandemic. And that was most unfortunate. Obviously, we were caught unawares like the world was caught unawares. Who would have believed you had you said 16 months ago that we were going to be in lockdown because of a pandemic that had engulfed the world? So that is a challenge. But we're constantly getting emails from people who have had bad experiences in hospital. For example, bad experiences in relation to COVID, where they went into the hospital free of COVID, were adjudged by the hospital following a test to be free of COVID, and yet they leave the hospital and they get COVID because they've been put into a COVID ward. And in some instances, people have died following that kind of scenario. And we're constantly getting phone calls and emails about these matters. And it is challenging, but we can start the ball rolling by, for example, getting in the hospital charts, having a detailed Zoom consultation with the client, and doing the best we can in terms of building the relationship, in terms of explaining what's involved and so on. And it's difficult, but it is doable. It's far more difficult, but it is doable. Now, the practice of law today involves a lot of regulation. When I started in practice 40 years ago, there was little or no regulation in the sense that you have it today. The Section 150 form, going through that form with the client, sending that form out to the client, explaining it and so on. That's a difficult exercise. And, clients have this inbuilt belief that anything to do with law is prohibitively expensive. Anything to do with the courts, anything to do with lawyers is prohibitively expensive. And a lot of the building of the relationship between the lawyer and the client, as I see it from the beginning, is reassuring them in relation to that, that even though they are going to take on the Goliaths of this world, they have a very, very good advocate in their corner who can absolutely ensure that they will never be exposed, for example, to an order for costs against them or whatever. Do you follow? So getting them over the hurdle of accepting that they can bring their case, they can ensure that justice is done on their behalf without exposing themselves to the scenario of losing their house if there's an order for costs against them or whatever.
So do you see, I suppose then, being very upfront about fee negotiations at the outset of a case as part of how you build or develop your relationship with the client, like that's an important aspect? I know some younger members sometimes express that, like, it's a difficult conversation to have sometimes, but I think it's a conversation that the longer you leave it, the more difficult it is. When the bills have already racked up or fees have been incurred, is the wrong time to have that conversation. How important do you think regular and frank discussions about fees are in terms of building your relationships with clients?
That's a very important question and a very good question. And it is it is absolutely to the forefront of every client when they come into the office. They're concerned about fees and they're concerned about exposure to massive fees. We do it in stages. We carry out investigative work initially in order to determine that there is or is not a cause of action. And that is, relatively speaking, an inexpensive exercise. It involves collecting in all the records from the hospital and getting a liability stroke causation report or more. You might have to get a couple of reports. You might have to get 2 or 3 reports from a UK-based expert. And we then reassess the situation when armed with those reports. If those reports indicate a liability and causation, then we run the case. We will run the case then on the basis of our own view that we're going to win this case, or we're going to make damn sure that we win it. And so there's a lot of heavy-duty, critical work done at the very beginning when the costs are insignificant, and we reassure the clients about that. But a lot of medical negligence work ultimately is contingency work, and otherwise they just don't have the wherewithal to undergo the risk. And practicing law is a wonderful privilege, as well as being, as well as it in all probability providing you with a very good livelihood and a rewarding livelihood. And it provides you with the opportunity of working in areas that you like working. But you're interacting with people who have sought you out. They have sought your advice out from all the other lawyers that they could have gone to. So that is a wonderful privilege. And it's something that continually, at this stage of my career, drives me on, that somebody has sought my opinion, and I will repay that by making damn sure that this case would be fought tooth and nail to the very end. And we will take on all comers and beat them. If we're in court, we're going to win. If we're not in court, we won't be in court with a useless case. But it is a wonderful privilege to have people seeking your opinion. I remember meeting a man recently who worked in the public sector, and he was in university with me. And he took early retirement, and I said, "How are you doing?" "Oh, much is," he said, this retirement business," he said, is for the birds, he said. "There's nobody looking for me anymore. There's nobody asking me to sign anything." And he had a nice job in the public sector at management level. He was a professional engineer. But his big disappointment in life was the fact that nobody was now looking for him. So there's no reason for him to get out of the bed in the morning. And we have people coming to us here, even during lockdown, seeking our advice on the phone, by Zoom and so on. And while it's difficult, we're still dealing with it. We're still managing. And we're still growing our client base. We're still opening new files. And that is a challenge.
Sure, it definitely is. I wonder if we might just focus on maybe our younger members for a moment or two, say people who are newly qualified this January, or maybe just had their first year during lockdown, unfortunately, and have been probably working from home for most of the year. How do they take the first steps to become that trusted advisor? You know, how do they get people to start looking for them instead of stopping looking for them, you know?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think building a relationship with a client is awfully important. When the very first consultation with the client is extremely important. You lower the temperature to a level that they find comfortable, and you almost stagger on to the matter that they have come in to consult with you. You've had a bit of how is your father, a bit of a chat about this, that, and the other. And you know, this is a feature of life in the west of Ireland far more than it is, say, in Dublin. Dublin people would be more matter of fact, bang, bang, bang. But it's even in Dublin, when I'm meeting clients in Dublin now, we have a chat about things generally, and then we almost stagger on to the matter about which they have come in to consult with me. So empathy, a listening ear, just hearing what they have to say, being patient with them, asking them to repeat what they say if you don't understand what they're saying or if you don't hear it. You know, understanding the mechanism of an accident if it's a PI claim arising from an accident in a factory. Just being empathetic, sympathetic, and listen, and take the time to listen. And we have a practice here that, you know, people come in, we always bring in junior solicitors with us or a trainee to a consultation. And they're furiously writing from the very beginning of the consultation. And I always say, don't write, stop writing, listen to the story. Listen to the story. And having listened to the story, you can make it a critical decision about whether this is going to grow, whether you're going to have to open a file, whether you're going to have to go through all the regulations or whatever, or complete all the regulatory forms or whatever, or simply bring it to an end on the basis that there's no help that you can provide. But even if you're working in a big office or a small office, having an energy about you, walking about the office, having a focus about you, walking about the office, asking questions, helping out, engaging in the social committee. For example, if there's a social committee, we have a social committee here in the office for the junior staff in particular, or whatever. Just getting involved, putting yourself out there. You're in the golf club, you're in the rugby club or whatever. You're meeting people. You're telling people where you work, what you can do. And you really have to put yourself out there. I mentioned at the very beginning, you're competing with your peers in the office if it's a big office. If you're in a small office, you're competing with other offices. And if you don't see your role in that light, then you're going to be passed by. You're going to be passed by. You know, engaging with for example, I'm sure, I'm not going to pry into your life and how you're managed, but I'm sure at the end of every year, at the end of every year, you have a review with your partner or whatever. And when you get to a certain stage, you're looking for a promotion. You want to become a senior associate. You want to become a partner. You want to increase the profit to yourself following your own endeavors. And it's a question of channeling those, letting the partner know that you're energetic, you're interested in promoting the firm. You want to go to the seminars, for example, that might be held in the university to attract young graduates onto your training program or whatever. That kind of, just to be seen in the office, to be noticed in the office. Young people should always dress well when they're at work. Always keep the front door well painted. Look the part. Put a bit of effort into your appearance. And when you're in court, you're representing the firm, you should stand out on the basis that you're well turned out and you're well presented. And if you're in court, be heard. When I started in practice 40 years ago, if you were standing at the back of the courthouse, you could never be heard. Nobody heard what was going on. And I remember deciding, when I'm representing a client, the entire courthouse will hear me. And that was just a little technique I used to get myself noticed and so on. And it's amazing how quickly the new kid in town becomes attractive and becomes topical. And you can, of course, there are new kids in the town biting at your backside all the time. So you have to keep yourself energized, keep yourself enthusiastic, and keep yourself in the public eye.
Great. I suppose I might pause now just to ask a very selfish question. So I'm 5 years qualified from January, Damien, and I just did have my review like that you were speaking about. And my partners are, looking forward over the next year, looking for me to develop practice areas further. I do a lot of procurement litigation myself, but I'm really a general commercial practitioner. And they're looking for, ways for me clients to pick that I could give presentations to, ways for me to showcase my expertise to clients over Zoom. Are these the kind of things that you think someone at my level should be engaged in? What more can I be doing really in I suppose the COVID era? It is all Zoom. Do you think the client knowledge presentations will play a stronger role in business development now? That's all you can really offer clients at the moment, unless they want to have a glass of wine with you at 6 o'clock on a Friday.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to do that for hours on end with their solicitor, I think. What else could I be doing to do that? Because that's kind of the mandate I've been given, develop your practice areas, strengthen your relationships, but it's quite difficult to do that at the moment and at my level.
Well, you're within Goodbody, as I understand it, is that right? Yeah, so they have a very big profile and have a very big client base, a lot of high-powered clients, and you have contact with a lot of clients, I take it. And you have been involved in a couple of cases on the commercial side in relation to those clients. You could hold a lecture in relation to it in the office. Decide that you're going to do a lecture on a particular topic that perhaps was relevant in some of the cases that you had with some of these big clients, and invite them in and bring in other people as well. We do that occasionally. We decide that a particular topic is of interest to some of our clients, and we offer to talk to them about that. And we might bring in some other people into the office early on a Thursday or a Friday morning at 8 o'clock to talk about that topic, and invite the partner. Make sure that the partner is there, and make damn sure that the presentation is very good. Do you follow? And you might have at the end of the lecture, you might have a number of typical questions, and if you have to plant a few questions, so be it, from your own staff. That's how things are done. And if you're appearing in court on a particularly sensitive, important case, make sure that the media know about it, and that you're noticed coming from court in relation to this, and that you have the necessary presence to be able to talk, if needs be, to the media about the case and about the relevant issues. Write an article in the Sunday Business Post, in the business section, and tell your partners that you're going to do that. This matter is relevant or whatever.
And do you think, Damien, that partners appreciate their associates taking the initiative in that regard? Like that it comes through, you have to take and drive yourself on to do that?
Absolutely. I certainly, I have a view about. I'm the senior partner here, in terms of age and in terms of my position in the firm. But I always consider myself the first amongst equals. So where somebody has to lead, but we're all equals. We have a very sort of friendly atmosphere about the place. You know, trainees have access to me, junior solicitors have access to me, partners have access to me all the time. And I take the time, whenever they do ask me a question, I take the time to go through it with them and to make damn sure that at the end of it, they leave my office better than when they came in and more informed than when they came in, you know. So we have no sort of, I certainly don't have any hang-ups about other people perhaps telling me something that I didn't know myself. I'm a bit of a dinosaur when it comes to equipment and computers and that kind of stuff. I had to get somebody else to set this up today. I couldn't even start to do that. But that's a skill that I don't have. But other people in the office have it. And we all have something to offer. And we can't do it on our own. And another way of enhancing your own reputation is to bring on juniors. To get them involved in your case, for example, and to assist you in doing the work, getting it done more quickly or whatever. Shortening the time for bringing cases to fruition. Shortening the time. I'm handling a case at the moment, and I'm dealing with a person who had a very high profile. And that same person was involved peripherally in another matter that involved one of the big firms in Dublin acting. Not your firm, but another equally big firm. And he said, you know, every meeting there was 4 or 5 people on the solicitor side of the desk, and we were on this side. And they went on for hours, and they were so gentlemanly about wondering whether to do this and that and the other. And he said, you know, working with you is a breath of fresh air in relation to that experience. So we deal with matters quickly. Be decisive. It's absolutely essential, Hannah, to be decisive and not to be afraid to make a decision. You know, making decisions is a skill in itself, but it's absolutely essential that you make decisions and that you don't procrastinate. And sometimes you might make the wrong decision, but at least you're making a decision and you're moving on. This thing of just wondering what you're going to do and being hesitant about whether you should do one thing or the other it's infuriating. You make a decision and you run with it. And the more experienced you become, the better you are at making the right decision. Risk-taking is another attribute that for a young lawyer starting off is something that they must always consider, you know. We have been involved in some very, very big land-breaking cases. And I remember when I was no more than 2 years in practice, getting instructions about a case that became famous. It was known as the Carramore case. It was the case entitled McGarry and others at the relation of the Attorney General versus Sligo County Council. Now, when you're pursuing a matter that has an interest beyond, say, the interest of your clients, that is of interest to the entire population of Ireland, for example, you don't have the necessary locus standi to pursue that matter unless the Attorney General consents to your doing so. And that consent is obtained by the granting of the Attorney General's fiat. And he will only grant it provided you give him an undertaking in relation to his costs. So I'm 2 years in practice. I go to the Attorney General to get his fiat, to allow this action to be prosecuted. And I'm 2 years in practice, I have to give him an undertaking because my clients wouldn't give it. So I gave an undertaking that if we lost the case, that the state's costs would be discharged.
A big risk.
A big risk, but I didn't consider it a big risk because I'm not going to bore you with the detail, but it involves Sligo County Council planning to build a dump in the middle of one of the most important concentration of megalithic tombs in Ireland. And in their own development plan, they had devoted 70 pages to the importance of this concentration of megalithic tombs. So I decided that really the risk was very small. And we lost in the High Court, but we were awarded half our costs. And we appealed it to the Supreme Court, and we won in the Supreme Court. And the costs in that case amounted to approximately 1.2 million, ultimately. So, you know, there is risk, but you can lay off the risk, and you can measure the risk by being critical and so on in the way you look at things, you know. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you at all, Damien, but we're just coming up, we're at 35 minutes now, so we're probably at our time for the evening. I could listen to you all evening, really. If you could open up more war stories, that'd be great. But I think we'll have to call it there. Thank you so much for your time, which is so kindly shared with us. It was really informative, and I hope everyone else got as much out of it as I did. Thank you very much.
That is all. Thank you very much.